Welcome back to another episode where we get to talk to somebody amazing out there doing amazing things in the world. And have you ever thought about being optimistic in the face of tragedy and death? Well, our guest, Vicki Paris Goodman, she's the author of To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. After the death in 2019 of her husband, Sam, the love of her life, she was unexpectedly flooded with optimism and presented with a host of possibilities for an exciting and meaningful future. She received valuable insights, seemingly coming from an outside source, enabling her to conceive a more realistic and uplifting understanding of adversity and loss. She knows these concepts will free others to face the passing of a loved one with a far more optimistic outlook. Vicki, I'm so excited to interview you here today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Angel.
I am so excited. Now, this is really like two seemingly controversial or emotions, right? Death and loss and grief and optimism. I don't think that most people would put those together. Give us a little bit more background on how you came to be here, Vicki.
Yes, well, my husband Sam passed in 2019, and I expected to not grieve for forever like some people seem to, but I did expect to have a very tough time after he passed, even though we had 2 years from diagnosis to his passing for me to get used to the idea of being without him. But on the day he passed, I was flooded with optimism. On the day he passed, and it was unseemly. My first instinct was to push it away. But then I thought, I've been so strong during our 2 year ordeal, and I took such good care of him toward the end that maybe if good things want to come my way, even on the day he passes, maybe I should let them. And that was the best decision I could have made because it began a sequence of events that was so unusual and unexpected. Not only was I flooded with optimism, but in the next few months there were serendipitous events that happened, maybe even signs from the afterlife. Opportunities began coming my way.
Can
And
you
I,
give me an example? Like what kinds of things were happening for you, Vicki? Because I know like I've heard your story and when I hear it, it just fills me with such joy. But yeah, give me an example of like something serendipitous or that
oh,
was happening for you.
Okay, well, about a month and a half, 2 months after Sam passed, I was on my way to Sam's celebration of life here in the small town we'd moved to for retirement. And I was on the road to the place where I was going to be having this event. And suddenly there's this cartoonish bright blue car in front of me, silly little car with a flower coming up from the roof, and it was bent back toward me so I could clearly see it was a sunflower. Well, what's unusual about that is that Sam loved sunflowers. He was always buying sunflowers and tulips because they were my favorite, but he often brought sunflowers home because he loved them so much. And I thought, I don't think I've ever seen a flower coming up from the roof of a car before. And now here's one, Sam's favorite flower, 45 minutes before his celebration of life begins. And at first I thought, oh, maybe it was someone who I'd invited who happened to know Sam loved sunflowers and they put it on the roof of their car. But the car turned onto a side street, not headed for the venue any longer. So, that was implausible anyway, that it would have been one of my guests who had put that on their car. It was just such an obvious sign from the afterlife. And actually, I didn't think of it that way at first. I did think of it, but I thought, no, 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 that's crazy. But other things started happening too. And after about seven of them, the first year after Sam passed, I started to think, you know what? These have been signs. There's just too many of them to chalk off to coincidence.
I think that
So,
happens, right? We'll dismiss something, right? Just as random or as a one thing or not really having any significance. And I think that's what happened for you, Vicki, is there were so many of them and they kept coming over and over again, which is why I know you share case, you highlight a lot of these inside of the book, but I mean, somebody else driving by wouldn't think anything. I mean, it probably would look kind of random to have a flower coming out of a car, but that it was really speaking to you throughout this process of grieving. Vicki, were people, I don't know, like, did people expect you to be more in mourning? How did they respond, the people around you? How did people around you respond to your optimism?
I had to hide it from some people. I'm so glad you asked that question. There was one couple, acquaintances of mine, who would whenever I'd run into them or see them at an event or at someone's house, they would approach me and kind of diminish their demeanor, become saddened in my presence, like in deference to my loss. And I felt pressure when they would do that to do the same thing. I'd kind of, okay, if I'd been smiling, I kind of made the smile a little less and kind of bring down the energy level and not be so happy. Um, and I was so glad a year after Sam passed when they finally stopped doing that. I guess they figured it had been long enough. And I thought, oh, what a relief. Now I can be just, happy if I want to be happy or not. But, I don't have to worry about the pressure to be a certain way.
I think there's almost like an expectation, right? You're the widow, you should be grieving, wearing black and be in mourning for, and it's almost like there's a time clock. And then, okay, that clock is passed, ticked past, right? And now we expect you to be over it almost, but yet you had this very joyful outlook on life from the very beginning. Do you think that part of our grieving is because we think that's how we're supposed to behave?
I think just about all of it is because of that. Not all of it, but I think almost all of it. And what I mean by that is, I think we grieve mostly for the changes to our life. As human beings, we're always a little fearful of the unknown and of uncertainty. And none of us knows what things are going to look like after the person we shared our home with or another loved one passes. And, I was the same. I thought, okay, what now? Even though I was feeling this optimism and this helping hand, leading me into into the next chapter of life, I didn't know exactly what it would look like. And that made me a little uncomfortable. And I was a little scared and, just apprehensive, I guess. Yeah.
So,
So,
yeah, you
but I
talk
think
about,
it's
yeah, the helping hand. Do you think was that Sam? How do you
at
describe that?
first, At first, I thought it was Sam. Now I think it was God. Oh, I was raised in a very secular household, and I had begun to believe some years ago, some years before Sam passed, in a higher power, but I hadn't taken that very far. It was a very rudimentary faith at that point. But after Sam passed, I really wanted to know where he was, if he was still around, and where he was. And so the hospice chaplain, um, I was meeting with her about once a month after Sam passed for a full year. And the first thing I asked her was, tell me about the afterlife. And she did. And she recommended the story of a neurosurgeon who had had a near death experience, a secular neurosurgeon. And his story brought me the rest of the way to fully believing in God and an afterlife. That's how convincing I found his story to be.
Wow.
And so, yeah, yeah, that was a real turning point.
It's
So
amazing, right? How, in the light of something so tragic, you did have this overwhelming feeling of optimism and really felt God helping you through it. And I know now this is what you do. Like, you have been called, Vicki. I know you feel a calling to help surviving spouses walk through this journey in a more optimistic way. How do you respond to, I mean, I think we've kind of covered it a little bit, but is death really something very tragic that we should all be scared to deal with?
that is one of the insights that came to me. I received all these insights in the first year or two, or even three after Sam passed. And the one about death not being tragic is actually one that came to me after I wrote the book. So it's not in the book. It's in my audio episodes that I have online for free to whoever would love to subscribe to them. Um, oh gosh.
I am going to ask you about those audio episodes because,
Yeah,
yeah, you've
no, that's
added
okay.
even
No,
more, right? We'll get to that.
yeah. Now I've even forgotten what your
Yeah,
question
we were talking
was.
about, is death tragic?
Oh,
Is it
is death
tragic?
tragic? Of course.
Yeah.
So this was one of the most powerful of all of the insights that came to me. And from having learned about the neurosurgeon's near-death experience and bringing myself all the way to fully believing in God and an afterlife, I it became obvious to me that God has a plan for each one of us.
Mm.
And it's not that we have no free will, but there is a general plan. I believe so strongly in this. And not everyone is going uh, to meet this, what we consider this ideal, where, you meet someone in your 20s and 30s, or your 20s or 30s, marry them and stay with them for 50, 60, 70 years, and then you both die and, when you're dotage. Um, that need not be the ideal that so many of us think it is. What if God has a different plan for you? What if his plan is for you to live a more segmented or compartmentalized life, sort of in chapters, maybe even with more than one person, more than one spouse. Our lives take different paths, and we need not feel that we were dealt an unlucky hand if our life is comprised of chapters
Mm.
instead of maybe one happy marriage to one person throughout. And that helped me so much to understand that what was happening to me was joyful. For one thing, I now think death is a cause for celebration. I'm not talking about a celebration of life. I'm talking about the actual passing of a loved one being a celebration. And the reason for that is if if there's a loving God, which so many of us believe that there is, and a beautiful beyond words afterlife, and if you go there even earlier in your life than you expected to, what is so terrible about that?
Mm.
I think there's something to that old adage, the good die young.
Mm.
Maybe God is rewarding them with early death so that they're not on this planet. A lot of us everyone goes through adversity in our time
For sure.
on this planet. And yeah, I mean, we suffer a lot. We have some really good times, but we suffer a lot of adversity, and that's just part of being a human on Earth. And maybe God rewards some with bringing that person to the afterlife sooner as opposed to later. I I think if there's a loving God and a beautiful beyond words afterlife, what is so terrible about death?
Mm.
And if you understand that God has a plan for you as the survivor, why dwell on the fact that you are now entering a new chapter of life, even if it's unexpected, beyond that chapter that you spent with your loved one? Maybe it requires a little courage, but it should be a cause for celebration too. Wow, I get to do exciting new things.
Well, Vicki, you do. I mean, you just have such an optimistic view on this, on this view. And I think a lot of it is that there are some expectations. We want to honor, right, the people that we loved and not forget them. What are some things that you do to continually just honor Sam's life now?
Oh, well. we had a greyhound that passed a few months before Sam did. And I didn't feel ready to get a dog, but I knew someday I'd get another greyhound. And it's funny, I just got one, and Sam would have adored this dog because one of the things about our other greyhound was Sam said, the only thing I'm disappointed with about Sid is that he's so mellow and chill that he doesn't get excited when we come home, and I kind of wanted a dog that got excited when we come home. Well, Hugo, my new dog, it gets beyond excited. He's going to break something with his tail. He gets so excited when we come home. But, there were other things. I acquired after Sam passed during the first year or so, there's this art auction site that I get emails from. I bought a wedding gift for my niece on it. And one day there was an affordable uh, print, I guess, or lithograph by an artist that Sam loved, but we could never afford anything of his before, a man named Marc Chagall. And this was actually affordable. And I bought it and I put it at the most prominent place on the wall in the most prominent place in the house. Sam would have loved it. So there were other things like that. But that's the kind of thing you can do to honor the memory of someone you love.
I love it. I love it, Vicki. The book
Yeah.
is called To Sam with Love, a surviving spouse's story of inspired grief. Now, Vicki, I know that you've got a website where people can come and get access to the book, but you also have, and you talked about this audio series that you have created. Can you tell us a little bit about that and where we find it?
Yes, the audio series is 3 episodes. They're free. Um, each episode is about 12 to 15 minutes, so they're not long. I think you've listened to at least one of them, Angel, and I know you liked it, so that was very encouraging. They have some of the insights in them that are not in the book because they came to me later, and including the one on death, which I go into more detail than I did here in the audio episode. And I think they're really uplifting episodes. So I would encourage you to go to inspiredgrief.com. All you have to do is put in your first name and email address, and you'll subscribe to the audio episodes. The book is also discounted at that site. So it's a great place to buy the book, probably the best place currently to buy the book. And you can also get to my blog from that page as well. There's some interesting articles there.
Right, inspiredgrief.com. And as you have heard, she has a very inspiring story about grief. And I've listened to 2 of the episodes, and they just really shift some of the paradigms on how we've been taught to grieve and what we think grieving might look like, but really giving ourselves a brand new perspective on how we can celebrate the loss in a really beautiful way. Inspiredgrief.com. Give a listen to that audio series. Make sure you grab a copy of her book, To Sam with Love, and probably very shortly thereafter, the next one. I know you're writing your next book as well, Speed Bumps, and other impediments to life in the fast lane. Vicki, is there anything else you wanted to share today that we didn't get to?
Sure, I would just like to say a couple of words about Speed Bumps, the new book, which is finished. It's just not published yet. It's about to be. Speed Bumps and Other Impediments to Life in the Fast Lane. It is about the trials of life from the point of view of a type A personality, which I am. It's pretty self-deprecating in places because I think type A's are a little bit ashamed of the way they can be so impatient. And, we're not the the book was written in order to be a place for other type A's to read and identify so that we don't feel so alone in our shame of the way we can be. And I think type B's will enjoy it too, these, more relaxed types of people, because most of them have type A's in their lives and they do not understand the motivations and behaviors of their type A's. So I think it's a good book for both, and I'm really excited about publishing it.
I'm excited for you as well. Vicki, do you speak to like grief support groups or different communities like that?
I do. I have. I would love to do more of it, actually.
Yeah, I can imagine, right? What a value add you bring to that. So if somebody is knows any great places, would love to have Vicki come in and speak, reach out to her. Again, you can find her at inspiredgrief.com. Vicki, thank you so much for sharing your story, your journey with us. And yes, yeah, to Sam with love. Thank you for bringing Vicki into our lives. Vicki, thanks so much for being my guest today.
Oh, thank you, Angel. It was my pleasure.
Fantastic. We will see you in the next episode.